There's a specific kind of financial trap that only catches people who did everything correctly, not the people who borrowed recklessly, not the ones who ignored their retirement accounts, not the ones who spent beyond their means, the ones who followed every instruction, bought the house in the right school district, built the specialized career, maxed the 401k, took on the right obligations at the right time, and then woke up one day to discover that the sum of all those correct decisions had quietly eliminated almost every other path available to them. That's the mechanism this episode is about. Most of us are taught to think about financial freedom as accumulation. The more you have, the more assets, the more income, the more stability, the more choices you'll eventually have. This is the foundational promise of conventional financial wisdom. Lock in the good things. Build layer by layer. The fortress of stability you construct today buys you the freedom to move tomorrow. It's a comforting story. And for long stretches, it feels true. The mortgage payment means you own something real. The specialized career means you earn more. The long-term commitment means you have something to show for it. Every decision feels like a door opening. What the story doesn't tell you is how fast doors close. The mechanism is called the time asymmetry of optionality. Optionality is a term from finance. It means the value of having choices available to you, the number of viable paths you can take without incurring catastrophic cost, the ability to say yes to an unexpected opportunity or no to an unfavorable situation without it destroying what you've built. The asymmetry is this: it takes years to build a genuine option, years of saving to accumulate liquid capital, years of skill building to open a new professional path, years of positioning to create real alternatives. But those options can be destroyed in moments. A commitment made without fully understanding its binding nature, a specialization that becomes obsolete, a lifestyle that quietly ratchets up its demands year over year until the cost of stopping is indistinguishable from the cost of collapse. The effort-to-loss ratio is wildly skewed. Building takes years. Losing takes an afternoon. This isn't accidental design. Consider how the most pervasive financial products are structured. Mortgages engineered for 30 years, car loans for 5 to 7, employment paths that reward deep specialization and penalize generalism, educational programs that demand significant upfront investment to justify the credential. Each of these structures makes it easy to commit and costly to uncommit. The psychological friction alone of unwinding a 30-year obligation is enormous before you've even calculated the financial penalties. Financial institutions derive stable, predictable revenue from long-term debt. A 30-year fixed mortgage creates decades of reliable income for the lender, while making it structurally difficult for the borrower to pivot without triggering penalties, closing costs, and market timing risk. Corporations benefit from specialized employees whose skills become less transferable over time, increasing their dependence on a single employer and reducing their leverage in every future negotiation. Educational institutions design programs that funnel students into specific, high-cost career paths. The upfront investment tuition, time, foregone income during training functions as a commitment device that makes staying on that path feel rational long after the person on it has stopped finding it meaningful. Because the alternative means absorbing the full cost of the investment without the return it was supposed to generate. The system isn't designed to trap you. It's designed for its own efficiency. Your predictability is a feature of that efficiency, not a side effect. The root incentive is stable participation. Individual predictability produces systemic stability. If people could move freely, change careers, relocate, restructure their financial commitments without significant penalty, the system would become less efficient and less profitable for those who sit at the intersection of long-term capital flows. So, the architecture rewards commitment. It makes commitment easy and exit expensive. It layers one obligation onto another until departure feels less like a choice and more like a catastrophe. And crucially, it does this while making each individual layer feel not just acceptable, but responsible. Smart, even. The language of prudence and security wraps around each commitment like insulation, muffling the sound of the door closing behind you. Here's what that looks like at ground level. Meet Dr. Nina Vasquez. She's 44, a radiologist, $310,000 a year, single, no children. By every external measure, she has made excellent decisions. She completed her residency at 32, paid off her medical school loans by 38 through disciplined repayment, and bought a beautiful home in a desirable neighborhood at 40 for $950,000. A substantial but seemingly manageable purchase on her income. She maxes her retirement accounts annually. She has a financial advisor who tells her she is on track. What Nina has built over 12 years of high-earning professional life is a structure that is almost entirely illiquid and entirely dependent on her continuing to do exactly what she is doing right now. Her mortgage payment, property taxes, and maintenance run roughly $7,200 a month. Her malpractice insurance and professional fees add another $2,800. Her retirement contributions, which she treats as non-negotiable, pull another $5,000. Before she buys food, she has $15,000 a month in fixed, non-discretionary outflows. Her take-home, after taxes on $310,000, is approximately $17,500 a month. She has $2,500 of actual discretionary margin. She is, by income, in the top 3% of American earners. She has the financial flexibility of someone earning considerably less. 3 years ago, Nina started feeling what she can only describe as a slow erosion. Not burnout exactly, more like the growing awareness that she is not doing this work anymore because she wants to. She is doing it because the structure of her financial life gives her no alternative. She has considered a research position at a university medical center meaningful work, aligned with where her interests have genuinely moved. The salary would be $190,000. The gap between $310,000 and $190,000 is $120,000 a year. Given her fixed costs, that gap is not a lifestyle adjustment. It is a structural impossibility. She has considered relocating to a smaller market where her income would stretch further and her pace of life would ease. But the house purchased at the peak of a favorable rate environment now carries terms she cannot replicate elsewhere. Selling means transaction costs of roughly 6-8%. A gap period between closing and purchase, and entering a new market at current rates. The math doesn't close. She has considered working part-time. Her hospital group does not offer that structure for her specialty. She asked once. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. She has considered a sabbatical 6 months, unpaid, to decompress and reorient. 6 months without income would require drawing from her retirement accounts, triggering penalties and taxes, and depleting the buffer she spent 12 years building. She has modeled this 3 times. Each time, the answer is the same. Every option she can name traces back to the same wall. The life she built, decision by decision, each one rational, each one praised by people who knew what they were talking about. That life now costs more to exit than to maintain. She is not trapped by her failures. She is trapped by her success. The window to take a significant risk, to pivot and rebuild on her own terms, didn't close dramatically. It closed quietly. One rational decision at a time. Over about 8 years, she never registered at closing. That's not a personal failure. That's the mechanism working exactly as designed. Let's put some numbers to what this costs over time. And these are illustrative, so run your own. Nina's $950,000 mortgage at a hypothetical 6.8% over 30 years carries a monthly principal and interest payment of roughly $6,200. Over the life of the loan, she'll pay approximately $2.23 million for a $950,000 asset, meaning $1.28 million in interest, paid in exchange for stability and the inability to move without significant penalty. That's not a criticism of buying property. It's the actual mathematics of the commitment. The cost isn't just the number. The cost is every decision that number makes impossible. Now add the optionality math. If Nina had structured her finances 3 years ago to maintain $4,000 less per month in fixed costs, a smaller property, a different rate, a leaner professional cost structure, she would have had roughly $144,000 more in discretionary capital annually. Over 5 years, at a conservative hypothetical 5% return, that's over $795,000 in cumulative flexibility she chose not to preserve. Not because she was careless, because the system made the higher commitment path feel like the smarter one. And by conventional metrics, it was. That's what makes this mechanism so effective. It isn't wrong by the standards it offers. It's the standards themselves that need examining. This dynamic scales into the professional dimension in ways that compound quietly. Deep specialization is rewarded with higher immediate income. It is also rewarded with a narrowing of transferable options. Each year spent deepening a niche, the market for adjacent skills tends to contract around you. The very expertise that justifies your current salary also makes you more dependent on the continued existence and compensation of that specific role. Industries shift. Technologies obsolete entire categories of work. The professional who has spent 15 years becoming irreplaceable in a single domain discovers, in a downturn, that irreplaceable in one context means difficult to place in any other. The system doesn't punish this. It created it. Deep specialization makes for reliable, productive, difficult to replace participants, which is exactly what an efficient economic machine requires. There's a subtler version of this that rarely gets named: the ratchet effect. Commitments, in almost every domain, are easier to acquire than to shed. A larger home requires more maintenance, more insurance, more property tax, and more psychological identity investment that makes downsizing feel like defeat rather than strategy. A more expensive lifestyle requires higher income, which requires deeper commitment to the role or the field that generates it, which reduces available time for building alternatives, children's activities, private schooling, the social environment that comes with living in a particular neighborhood. Each of these carries not just a financial cost, but a social contract that makes exit expensive in ways that don't show up on a balance sheet. The time asymmetry of optionality reveals itself most clearly in this ratchet. It clicks forward easily, one commitment at a time, each one individually justifiable, each one carrying a plausible benefit. It clicks backward with extraordinary difficulty, not because any single commitment is impossible to undo, most of them technically are, but because they arrive in a configuration where undoing any one of them destabilizes the others. The mortgage requires the income, that requires the career, that requires the geographic location, that constrains the schools, that shapes the neighborhood, that reinforces the lifestyle, that demands the income. Pull one thread, and the structure trembles. So, no one pulls. The social dimension compounds this further. The expectations of maintaining a certain lifestyle, the vacations, the cars, the activities, the visible markers of a life that's working are often funded by the same commitment cycle that erodes optionality, and they're reinforced by peers who are on the same treadmill, making similar decisions for similar reasons, providing mutual validation that the path is correct, not because any individual is manipulating anyone else, because a system that profits from stable, committed, high-earning participants has a structural interest in making that participation feel like success. What does this reveal about what we actually mean by security? Conventional security is a fixed thing. Assets, income, stability, the fortress. But in a world governed by the time asymmetry of optionality, that definition is incomplete to the point of being misleading. A fortress is also a prison if the doors only open from the outside. True resilience isn't the size of what you've accumulated. It's the ratio of what you've accumulated to what you're obligated to maintain. It's the distance between your fixed costs and your income floor, the number of months you could sustain your life without your primary income source. It's the number of viable paths available to you right now, not the number of paths that were available when you started. The most valuable financial asset is not a portfolio balance or a home equity figure. It's the capacity to make a decision that costs you something. A pay cut, a relocation, a professional reinvention without that decision triggering a cascade of other failures. It's the ability to absorb a voluntary disruption. Most people optimize their financial lives for performance in stable conditions. Very few optimized for adaptability in unstable ones. And the system made sure that the path to the former felt, at every step, like the responsible choice. The question isn't whether the decisions Nina made were wrong. They weren't, by the standards she was given. The question is whether the standards she was given were designed with her freedom in mind or with the system's stability in mind. Those are not the same question with the same answer. The system isn't designed to punish people who fail. It's designed to make the ones who succeed just enough, the ones who are competent, diligent, and rewarded with exactly enough to stay, find the exit too expensive to use. Not because they're trapped, because every individual lock on the door felt at the time like a key. Comfort isn't the opposite of suffering. Sometimes it's just suffering with better furniture. What's one decision you made for security that you now realize quietly closed a door you didn't know you needed? When people see this mechanism clearly for the first time, the next question is almost always the same. Is there a point at which the options are gone for good, or is the window still open? The answer depends less on how much you have, and more on what you're currently obligated to keep.